Hey guys, today I'm going to make you a video on a new product that I'm pretty pumped for. I've been waiting on. This is applicable to any and all EFI systems or even a power grid or with a carburetor. This is going to be transmission converter, charge pressure control, dumps, a pop-off valve, regulator, the whole 9 yards. So I'm going to show you what I've been running. I have a Turbo 400 in my personal car, and I've been running a regulator from ATF Speed. All this does is it keeps converter charge pressure under whatever you adjust the regulator to here. Okay, so this regulator has worked really good for me, and I regulate converter charge pressure to about 95 to 100 pounds on just about every car that I do. But after talking with Cameron and Byron for a little while, they'd started working on a new setup that will have this regulator built into it, smaller. It'll also have 2 dump valves. So this setup's actually pretty slick. I'm a big fan of it. I'm going to install it here shortly, but I wanted to show you off of the bench. So this will bolt on to the governor cover, okay, like so, right? And you'll have your 2 dump valves that you can activate with an output from your ECU or your power grid or whatever it is. And the converter charge pressure is going to come, it comes out of the lower cooler port and it goes back here. And currently what it's been doing is it's been hitting this regulator, and then the regulator opens and dumps the pressure back into the governor cover. Then my car's got a transmission cooler on it. I drive this car on the street. So it would go, here is where it goes back to the cooler, and then it comes back from the cooler and goes to the top port. Well, with this setup, there's no dump on it right now. Okay, there's 0 dumps on the car. I haven't used dumps on this car for a while, so it's spool up or tight converter or track conditions, whatever it may be you want to use the dump for. I'll show you how to do it in the Holley software, how to wire it, how to set it up in the software as an output. And if you have a different ECU, that's your fault. So you can figure it out with a different ECU, but I'm going to show you how to do it with Holley. So there's a couple things on this block that is pretty slick. So this is a governor cover, okay? It's going to go here like this, and there's some ports on it. So right here, this port is where I'm going to be putting the pressure transducer. Okay, so this right here is going to go right here, and then you've got 2 dump valves on it, right? So these are the valves right here. They thread up in here. They're all machined inside, and this is where the magic happens on the back side. So there is a pop-off in the top right here that is set to 120 psi. So this pop-off that's machined inside of here, there's a spring in there with a little ball, and it will open at 120 psi. So if you've got a pump that's producing, say, 150, 160 psi, 180, whatever it is, that's how you hurt thrust bearings in an engine, right? By too high of a converter charge pressure, because it starts to try to push or thrust the converter out the front of the transmission and into the flex plate. And it pushes on the crank. It tries to push the crank out of the front of the engine. So the pop-off is already built into this block. All right, so it's going to eliminate this. It's going to eliminate this piece from ATF, and the pop-off vents right here through this hole. So this hole right here is, in essence, what this is doing. Okay, so if this is also adjustable by putting shim underneath it here. All right, so if your pump is weak and it's only putting out 60 psi, the pop-off won't do anything for you. You need to address the problem, right? So if the pump is too weak and it's not flowing enough fluid, you need to address the problem. Now, the next part of this is the dump valves, right? So the dumps they open, with just a 12 volt and ground, but then there's 2 jets back here. So it's kind of hard to see, but this thing, when you buy one, these jets, they'll either be pre-drilled or they may be blank, but you're going to drill these jets to whatever size you want. So right now, what I have is a big hole here and a small hole here, right? So this could be stage 1 for spooling. This could be stage 2 for when I let go of the brake. I want this one closed, but I want this one open to loosen the converter up and let it, drive down the racetrack, and then I'll close it, say 0.8 or so into the run. So we're regulating pressure, all right, all the time. We're always regulating pressure. So the pressure is going to be regulated to, whatever you set it at with shim, or, you leave it and it's about 120 PSI. So that'll keep the converter full. That's keeping the converter full when you're going down the racetrack, or when you're driving around town. These two ports here are where the dump valves are actually venting from. So if all you want to do is use this setup to help spool the car because you have too tight of a converter, then what you could do is you could probably leave these jets out of it completely and just vent all of the fluid the moment you open up the dumps. Okay? So once you divert all of the fluid flow, the converter gets extremely loose. And once I have the transmission back in and whatnot, I'll make a short video of, with dumps and without dumps and how it responds on the trans brake. But you can tune these by drilling the jet, right? So this plug is your jet. So you plug it off. You either open it up for more fluid flow through it, which will, lower converter charge pressure, or less if you just want to soften the hit a little bit, at the racetrack. So for being an all-in-one unit, this thing is going to come, this port right here, that's where the fluid's going to come from the transmission. It's going to come along this line. It's going to tee in. I'm going to reuse this tee, and it's going to go into here, and then all the magic happens in here, and then the remainder of the fluid will go back to the cooler and loop back around into the transmission. If you don't run a cooler, you just run a line straight into here, and then you're done. So I'm going to bolt this thing up, and I'll terminate these wires here so that we can, make a nice plug and harness that'll go up to the ECU, and we'll screw in the sensor and change over all the fittings and whatnot. But this is kind of the preamble to it. This is actually really slick. I'm a fan of the fact that it's all in one. It's not, we don't have to screw around with a whole bunch of stuff everywhere. So, and it fits nice and tight to the transmission. It'll clear the floor pan, the whole 9 yards. This right now is pretty tight to the floor pan, where, this is quite a bit lower profile and smaller. So if you can see that there. So, all right, give me a minute and I'll bolt this back up and eventually get it up in the car. All right, so we got the new dump valve and regulator block all mounted up. It's all wired. Here's our pressure transducer. And this under here is where the pop-off is. Like I showed earlier, I've got a hose ran from the bottom cooler port on the transmission into the T. And then out of the T, this is going to go back to the cooler. And if you're using like a trackside remote cooler, you could just do the same thing, but you would grab it from the pan, and then you can pump it back in through here. But what I'm doing here is it's going out back to the cooler, then comes back from the cooler, goes back in here. And now we're just going to slide it up underneath the car. Terminated the connection for the two dump valves. Kind of see it down there. There they are. So the cool thing about this is that these actual solenoid valves are available right from Grainger. So, there's typically a Grainger in just about every city. You can get everything next day. I'm sure McMaster Car has them as well. So if you ever get, if you destroy one or you lose one or whatever, you can get them next day from McMaster or Grainger or whomever. So now I just got to slide this in the car, and I will come back to this video when I've got the car up and running, and I'll show you how to wire it, and how I wired it, and then how you set it up in Holley software. So sit tight. Okay, so I bolted up the double dump valve with the regulator built into it, and I've actually had this out and tested it. I decided to wait to make this part of the video, until I had some data to show you the difference while on the trans brake. So what we did here was I created two outputs. I just labeled them trans dump 1, trans dump 2. I had grounded one wire off of each of the solenoids, and then I'm sending 12 volt from the ECU to activate them. So just like every other output that you have on your ECU, you would go into your pin map, go to view outputs, and you would create your output, and you would drop it right here, trans dump 1, trans dump 2. So here we are, trans dump 1. Here's how I set them up for my personal car. So this one, trans dump 1, which remember I showed you the two different jets that are in it. I made trans dump 1 be the larger jet, and then trans dump 2 be the smaller jet. So the way I set both of them up just for this test here was to have them activated while you were on the trans brake. And I also have a master enable switch in the car that turns the boost controller on, the data logger, the whole 9 yards. So that comes on. So both of those have to be activated. So and boost has to be below 15 pounds. So this was just for testing. Okay. So the data log we're going to look at, I actually had it at boost below 8 pounds. But anyway, so this is how you set them up. You can also set these up if you wanted to, say you just wanted to activate one just when you release it. So you can go trans brake relaunch is at input release. So it would activate when you release the trans brake, and then you can run a timer here. So your active time would be like, whatever, 0.8 seconds from the release of the trans brake. So of course you'd have all these, you'd only have one of these, right? It would only be this at input release. So if you wanted to use just one while you're on the trans brake and then switch over to the other when you release the trans brake to kind of soften the blow, soften the hit to the tires, you could do it that way as well. And then, of course, you've got as many sensor input triggers as you want. So I just used boost, below, and this was an easy way for me to show you all when it was on the trans brake and how it works. So now I'm going to, we're going to look at some data to show you how it worked. But you need to understand that the converter that's in my car is, some of you guys are going to watch this video and go, man, my car spools faster than this. Well, this car's got a 98 millimeter on it. It weighs 3,200 pounds, and it makes right at 2,000-ish horsepower. So the converter that's in this car is very tight. I drive this car on the street a lot too. So understand that, without, you can't compare your Borg-Warner S480 with a 5.3 versus this, because the power difference is so dramatic, that the converter difference is so dramatic. So anyway, we'll look at we're going to look at a data log here and show you kind of how it works. But again, trans dump 2 is the same way. When master enable, and I had them turning both off at the same time. So here's a log. Okay. So this line up here, so you can see this is RPM, all right? So you can see that the jagged line here, the dotted line, the comparison folder, is without a dump valve on, okay? There's no dump valves on this, all right? Now, this is the same converter in both combos. One's with a dump valve, one's without a dump valve. There's very, very minor tune-up changes. The biggest change is really the weather, right? So you can see where it kind of rolls over, right? So both of them roll over, but notice here by 2 seconds from an idle, right? We're 2 seconds from an idle. The solid line is with the dump valves open. So you can see the solid line is your first log. You can see that the trans dumps are open, right? They're on. Along, and you'll notice that here trans dump 1 is undefined, trans dump 2 is undefined, because they weren't in the car when I did this. So we'll tab over and you'll see that we get to the chip a whole heck of a lot faster. So there's the chip right there, and notice that by about 2 seconds, about 2.2 seconds from an idle, we're at 4,000 RPM versus 3,600. Notice we're ahead on boost, right? And you can also see converter charge pressure, 23 PSI versus 83. So prior to putting these dumps on, as I showed earlier in this video, is I had a little regulator that regulated the charge pressure to right around 90 psi. So that's why you see that difference of 83 psi versus 23. Now, I've achieved 23 psi by just having both of the dump valves open. You can see trans dump 1, trans dump 2, they're both open, they're on, they're active. So it allowed it to roll up higher and quicker to the chip. Okay? Now we can start yanking timing out of it once it's on the chip. And if you look, here we are in 4 seconds, about 4 seconds from an idle here. We've achieved 10.4 pounds of boost, and 4,161 RPM. But I turned these dump valves on, so you see this line here, right? You can see how it went away. I'm going to open up both of them. They overlay on top of each other, but you'll see right here, this yellow line, this is when the dump is open, and this is where the dump closes, okay? So this was right at, I think I turned them on, there you go, right at 8.1 pounds of boost is when I turned them off, right? So 8.1 pounds of boost is where I turned them off. I eventually, after testing these a couple times, I wound up moving that number up a little bit. But you can see how much ahead it is in boost, right? So that's all from being able to get to the chip faster and, being able to, remove timing out of it quicker and load the engine a little harder while it's on the chip. So overall, you can see where here's the dump. Here we are at 22 psi, and as we scroll over, we're right around 20 psi with both dumps open, and we close the dumps right there, and we see the pressure climb right back up. So here's the pressure. It's climbing all the way up to right around 110 psi, and that's where the pop-off opens, which is what I had explained before. So there's no need to have a regulator built in as well. Pop-off opens right around 110, and it settles it back down to right around 70 psi while still on the chip. And then again, it does the same thing as it pops off and goes back up when you let go of the trans brake. So right here is where we let go of the trans brake. Right there, you can see, right here I got a little identifier here for trans brake, right? So we'll let go of the brake right there, and pressure is going to start to climb until it reaches the pop off and open up again. So overall, this thing's been awesome. I tested this piece extensively this weekend at Galot, and I'm very, very happy with how it works. I have not used it yet to open up going down the racetrack. Haven't found a point of loss of traction yet where the converter just kind of couples too hard. But I haven't found that point yet. When I do, what I'll do is I'll wind up opening one for, like I explained here, I'll wind up only opening one of them while on the trans brake, and then the other one will be opened up like I showed you here. The T-brake launch at input release with a timer. So, but for right now, these things they're jam up. It has helped tremendously getting up on the chip. Any little bit that you can get to get the thing to come up and boost faster makes the car a lot more consistent, heats the trans up less, yada yada. So hopefully this helps, and hopefully it answers a bunch of questions. And again, you can also remove the jets completely if you want, and I have a feeling that this 23 psi with the jets out of it is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of like 2 or 3, because it's got 2 5/16 holes just pumping all the fluid back into the case or into the governor cover, as opposed to having to, go back through the whole circuit. So hopefully it helps. Hopefully it explains everything and how this thing works. See you guys later.